And on another note, I just want to bring up, which I'm sure some of you are either really annoyed or laughing at me. I'm a little annoyed at myself, but pretty much laughing at myself. So I'm really excited to let you know my second book, WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey Skeptic Investigates Even More Evidence of an Afterlife and Fights for Justice with Her Dead Dog, is available for pre-order. And I made this really professional sounding, really important little announcement that I put in its own episode. And because I am doing 2 trillion things running this and my other business, just like I'm sure all of us, a bit overworked, I uploaded the unedited version. It's been corrected, so you now can just hear the edited version, but I gave you a little behind the scenes. Luckily, nothing too embarrassing, just me saying the same lines like multiple times and probably muttering fuck a few times and maybe coughing. I don't know. So sorry about that. That's just part of listening to an independent podcast. Don't always get it perfect, but I hope you will still get the book. And I have a very professional little announcement up about it now. And now on to my conversation with Shaun Lether. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Shaun Lether. I met Shaun at the IANDS conference, International Association of Near-Death Studies. Through a series of near-death experiences, NDEs, and Spiritually Transformative Experiences, STEs, and their powerful after effects, Shaun Lether woke up to his soul's purpose, centering around mind, body, and spirit healing and being of service to others. In this episode, Shaun shares some details of his NDE and some of his STEs, and they're really fascinating and evidential. Shaun is the founder and leader of Hawaiian IANDS and leads STE experiencers sharing groups. I absolutely loved talking with Shaun, both at the conference and in this podcast. So here's my talk with Shaun Lether. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to let you know it's finally here. Book 2 in the What the Fuck Just Happened series is ready for pre-order on Amazon, and it will be officially live August 15th and then available everywhere. And yes, I can now say that WTF Just Happened is actually a series. That's also super exciting and kind of surreal. This book is titled WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey Skeptic Investigates Even More Evidence of an Afterlife and Fights for Justice with Her Dead Dog. And it's available to pre-order on Amazon. I'll put a link out in the show notes, on Instagram highlights, and on my website, WTFJustHappened.net. Welcome to What the F Just Happened? I'm your host, Liz Enton. If you listened to the intro, you know my story. If not, here's a brief summary. I'm a sciencey skeptic, and when my dad died, I took a shot in the dark and decided to investigate if there was any possible evidence of an afterlife. I assumed that was as realistic as Santa Claus, but I was desperate. However, I was so blown away by what I discovered that I wrote a book and launched this podcast. In this podcast, I'll be talking to some fairly normal people about some really weird stuff. I speak with everyone from psychic mediums and afterlife researchers to ordinary people who've had some inexplicable experiences. So come, listen. There's no need to draw any final conclusions. Keep an open mind and wonder, what the F just happened? So today I am speaking with Shaun Lether. He is a near-death experiencer. I met him at the IANDS, International Association of Near-Death Studies. I met him at their conference that I had an amazing time and opportunity attending. And Shaun is head of Hawaiian IANDS division and has one of those, like, what the fuck, laws of the universe are different than we think stories that he is going to share with us today. So welcome, Shaun.
Thank you, Liz. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for coming on. So tell us a little bit, first of all, we'll get into your NDE as a little further on. Tell us a little first about you. What was your life like before your near-death experience?
Well, so I've always had a connection to the other side because now I understand, but I didn't then. When I was 6 months old, I had an NDE. I was in the ICU, and that was the first time that I had that kind of experience. And of course, I don't remember the experience, but I had this, but everybody in my family, they thought I was going to die. I was in an oxygen tank and everything. And I had this connection to the other side. And the problem is I grew up in a completely very dysfunctional family with a narcissistic parent, and my mother, she'd actually had an NDE in I think it was like 76 or 77. So it had only been like 2 years since Raymond Moody came out, with the classification, but they didn't know that, and so she actually was in mental institutions. And as a result of that, I grew up in a really traumatic, dysfunctional household, and I saw a lot of things, and I started not trusting myself. And so I'd had this connection to the other side, but I stopped trusting myself. And that went on for many years. And I would get premonitions and see things before they happened. And I would actually tell my parents, this is going to happen. And they didn't believe me, my dad especially. And it would happen over and over again. And it cost him a lot of money. Like I saw that we were being robbed once. And then I saw that we had this barn that was going to burn down. And I kept telling him, it's going to burn down. And he didn't listen, and it burned down. And then there was another time with my little sister. We'd been digging this big pond at the back of our property, and there was a giant dump truck going to move the dirt. And I literally had this vision that it's going to tip over, and it was going to crash onto me and my sister. And I told my dad, and he didn't care. And, well, he didn't believe me. And so I just grabbed my sister and we moved out of the way. And sure enough, it tipped over and crashed right where we were. So I was having these experiences, but for whatever reason, I doubted myself.
Was there a time? I mean, it seemed like you kept saying things, so they kept getting verified and happening. Was there ever a time where your family started to believe you, or no?
No. What was weird is my dad would say, I should have listened. And then the next time it would happen, he didn't listen. Yeah. And so, ironically, there's been a lot of stuff that I've seen. And even now that some of it's taken 20 years to come true. Now they listen.
But you had an NDE also as an adult. You had another one, which we'll get into in a bit. But you said your mom had an NDE. I actually don't think I knew that. I went to your presentation, but either I don't remember that part or you hadn't brought it up there.
Chances are I didn't bring it up. I don't know what I said, actually, to tell you the truth. I don't really watch my videos, But yeah, she did. And it was quite traumatic because it was also brought up my first abandonment issues when she was hauled out on a stretcher. And then after, so she had the choice to come back. Well, actually, I
So
gotta
come
back that
back
up.
from her NDE,
Yeah,
not come back
I have
after.
to, yeah. So I have to back that up because she, I think I know she wanted to not come back, but she did for me and my little sister. And that was the only reason. Because she then, for the rest of most of my life, she would cry out to her father who had died to come get her. And so she was all, and it was awful. She was not happy with her decisions. And like I said, she was in several mental institutions and never, nobody, I didn't even understand it, of course, because I was a kid.
Had she struggled with mental health issues prior to her NDE?
Yes, but she actually came to me after she died and before my NDE. And or I should say my major, because I had another one in 2004 that brought me to Hawaii that not only, well, it actually made me stay in Hawaii. Because I was quite happy with my life in Los Angeles. After she passed and started coming to me, she explained to me, I asked why she was here and all this stuff, but she actually showed me why she was the way she was. And she showed me her life and what had happened. And, so when she did that, what's kind of interesting is there was a lot of trauma that I still deal with to this day from her and my dad. But when she showed me, after she died, she showed me her life. That actually, it was like, so in our world, we think of it as forgiveness, but there's nothing to forgive because I had the complete picture and I saw the way she was or I saw her life. And so I understood why she was the way she was, why she did the things that she did. And there was nothing to forgive.
And I'm assuming, which obviously I don't want to go into or ask you to go into too much personal stuff about your family, but I'm assuming it was based on her own childhood traumas and own family.
Yeah, she showed me that. Yeah, and you're welcome to ask whatever you want. Yeah, no, she showed me. Her mom was like 45 and done. All her brothers and sisters had already been raised, and they're like a Dutch family. My family's all Dutch, and my mom's the only one that was born in this country. And so, they're kind of like old ways in the way they do things then. And so she showed me what her life was like. And her mom was done raising kids. She didn't want kids. Her and my grandfather were kind of having the normal like separation issues. And, not that they weren't in love, but like just, things change. And then my mom came along and she got all the attention from my grandfather that wasn't going to my grandmother. And so there was resentment and all kinds of things. And I didn't know any of this, but she showed it to me. And so all of her mental health issues, as a result of the way that she was raised, they fed over. And then, of course, she had her near-death experience. Yeah, so it was very traumatic growing up. There was all kinds of abuse. She was in and out of mental institutions. And, but once I saw her life, it was as if there was nothing to forgive. And I completely understood why she was the way she was.
And this was when she came to you after she had passed away. And how this was the first time she communicated with you after passing?
Yeah. Within a day or so of her passing, um, I was struggling here in Hawaii with all kinds of issues that had happened after the near-death experience that made me stay in Hawaii. And I was shocked because I didn't, this was my first real after-death communication with a person that I knew. And at first I didn't, I wasn't sure that it was really her. But she told me I don't need to go to this memorial because and she showed me a garden, and she said, "Go here. This is where I'll be." And she showed me this garden with these tall, beautiful trees, and she was sitting on a log. And my mom's into plants. She was a florist. I'm into plants. She taught me all kinds of things about plants. I was a licensed landscape contractor in California. And so she showed me this beautiful garden and said, "This is where I'll be." Well, I had no idea where this garden is. And about a year after she passed, one of my sisters was here. And we decided to go do some things that we hadn't done before. And so I chose this park and this valley that we hadn't gone to before. And we went back in this valley, and all of a sudden I started getting what felt like vertigo then. We were under this tree, this old banyan tree, and I started getting vertigo, and I couldn't understand what was going on. All I knew is I needed to get out of there and away from this tree. So as we're driving through this valley, and then we start going up this hill to this park that we were going to go to, that I'd never been to. And as we're going up this mountain, and it's only like 3,500 feet elevation. And I'm used to, because I was born in Salt Lake City and I have a house in Big Bear Lake, California. So I'm used to like 10,000 feet easily, no big deal. So I don't get elevation sickness. But as we're going up this hill, I was getting like vertigo and getting more and more dizzy. And as we got to this park, I got out of the car, and literally I was so dizzy, I did a face plant on the ground. And we went and we sat on this picnic table, and we sat there, I got my breath and everything. And we started to go for a walk through this park on the top of the mountain. And as we're walking, my sister was up ahead of me and to the right. And as we're walking, I look over to the left, and there's my mom sitting on a log in the garden that she had shown me a year ago. She physically appeared to me. And I burst into tears with my sister. And my sister already knew. I hadn't told many people, but my mom, I'd already told her about my mom coming to me and my mom showing me, things about her life. Also, before that, my mom had grabbed my arm, like physically, I could feel her grabbing my arm. And so when this happened, even though she wasn't experiencing what I was experiencing, she knew that I was experiencing something. And so we went and we took photos, and we're trying to hopefully we'd catch it on camera, like an orb or something, which we didn't. But so, yeah, I got to finally see the place that she had shown me that she was going to be. And so she got stronger and stronger. Now I've seen it. And what I later learned, because I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. What I learned is that's like when your pineal gland is opening, it can cause, and some people call it like ascension sickness and different things. It literally causes this vertigo. And that's what I was experiencing, because as we got closer to this place, I was being more and more connected. In Hawaii, we call them portals. And actually there's portals all over the world where it's easier for those realms and our realms to meet. And so that's what I was experiencing in that place.
And when your mom showed you the video, not the video, but the images of the garden, how was that? Were you sensorially compared? Was it like watching a movie? Was it like you were literally there the first time
Wait, you mean when she showed it to me the first time before I'd been there?
before you'd been there? Yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was like an image. It was, I think it was more like a still image for that instance. That was more like a still image. But the ones when she had showed me her childhood and with her mother and the resentment between her father and her mother, those were moving images because she would actually show me she was a prima ballerina. She loved to dance. And so I could see that in motion. And the sad thing was, her mom was jealous of her. And but what's interesting is now I understand, like I said, and this is a normal thing that's been going on since the beginning of time. I kind of researched it after because it happened with her mother and then my mother and my sister and then one of my sisters and her stepdaughter. Like it's a thing that goes on. And and it's been going on since the beginning of the time. And so it was interesting. I'm not a biblical person. I was not religious or anything, but there's this saying about sins of the father. And what it really means, at least what my mom explained to me, is that there's stuff that we come here to heal. And if we don't heal it, it carries on and on and on. And so it's actually possible for the one who wakes up in the family to heal a lot of this generational stuff that goes on.
Right. They call it generational trauma and then the cycle breakers, right?
Is that what they call it? I don't.
Yes. Yes. So it sounds like that's your role. So
It seems like it.
and then when you saw your mom in the garden, was it like seeing a real person, as real as if she'd been living?
Yeah. So she was kind of a little bit translucent, but it was real. I mean, I don't just like burst into tears in public. And I did. And
Right.
and what was funny is also this sister, she knew what was going on, but she hadn't experienced this stuff, but she knew by the way I was reacting, this was real. I mean, and I was, and so yes, it was literally, like I said, it was still a little bit transparent, but it was so clear. It was beyond mistake that she was there.
And you said your mom had had an NDE. Did she, and you were already born at the time, you were a small child. And
Yeah.
did she have any of the after effects? I mean, it sounds like she was still pretty difficult, but did she have what
Oh,
aspects of
totally. So number one, she's very psychic. And she was always, I think I said, like, her dad, she was always crying out for her dad. She would always see her dad. She wanted him to take her home, but she was very psychic. It's amazing. I didn't realize that as a kid, but she was into astrology and she could do it by hand. And we grew up LDS, the Mormons in Salt Lake City, and they actually threatened to excommunicate her several times for doing astrology and certain things like that. And so she was a master at doing it. And what I'm now seeing as I'm looking back, she took me to learn iridology. She took me to learn how to do astral projection when I was 12 years old. She was not your average Mormon mother. And she, it's amazing the stuff she was teaching me. And I know that she didn't know consciously, and I know that I didn't know consciously. but she was preparing me for the things that I was going to experience and I have experienced later. Yeah. So one of the things that she did that's so amazing. So like I said, she would do astral charts by hand, all the calculations. I mean, nowadays they use computers and apps, but she did them all by hand, and she knew exactly how to do. So she did everybody's chart in our family. If you dated anybody or was even friends with people, she did their charts. And so she did my chart many times, but one of the first rememberings that I have is she sat me down. I was about like 6, 7, 8, something like that. And she didn't want to scare me, but she told me like certain things that I shouldn't eat, like wheat, which later has proven out to be true. I have a huge allergy to wheat. And she said, you're going to die when you're 50. But the way that she said it, she didn't say it like to scare me. My mom and I, we had talks all the time on the afterlife and everything, because it was a big deal to me because of what had happened with her, about losing her. So she promised when I was 5 years old that she would always be with me no matter what. And which I didn't remember until she started coming. And then when she did this chart, she told me at 50, you're going to die. And she said, but it doesn't mean you're like going to die, but in some aspect, something major is going to happen. And in January, on my 50th birthday, I was actually in the ICU on life support. And that's when I had my major NDE, which for me was more like a rebirth, but she was correct. And like I say, it wasn't something that I feared, and she didn't raise me to be fearful of it. And in fact, I was more conscious of stuff that I shouldn't eat and other things than dying. So that was how well she made it so I wasn't afraid of it.
And you weren't afraid because of her near-death experience. You thought there was an afterlife, or that the afterlife was good, or...
Yeah, I was more afraid of just losing her and losing loved ones. I wasn't really afraid of dying at all. I didn't want to die. So when I had the NDE in 2004, and also, you know what, I'll back up just a little bit more before that, because you'd asked about growing up. So I had all these things that I was seeing and I knew to be true. And I had this knowing from the other side. And the thing that I always knew is it wasn't me. That's all I knew. Like, I didn't know where this stuff was coming from, but I knew that it wasn't me. And but I still didn't necessarily trust it, but I would see afterwards this was true, what I'd seen. I sought out external validation big time. And I moved to Santa Barbara, California, and I went to college there. And I met who is the closest thing you could have in this country to a guru. She was an Indian Brahmin, Oxford educated, and she opened my whole world to Vedanta and Yogananda and all of these different teachings, you know. And that was at the same time that I met Marianne Williamson with A Course in Miracles. So I started actually having an awakening then when I was 18. And that was the first time this voice that I'd heard before but didn't trust, it actually came out loud. And what happened is I went to a Trader Joe's, and I got out of the car and I spit my gum on the asphalt, and I heard this voice that says, "Pick it up." And I didn't trust this voice. I'm like, what's going on here? So I kept walking towards Trader Joe's, and as I walked a little further, the voice was a little louder and it said, "Pick it up." And again, I didn't listen. And I mean, I heard it, but I didn't, I just thought, okay, this is my consciousness, something, or my conscience, something. And as I got closer to the door, it got loud and firm. And it said, pick it up. So I went back to the car. I picked up the piece of gum and I threw it in the trash. And the voice said, how are you going to listen to the big things if you can't listen to the little things? And that just blew my mind, because I was driving, I drove from Santa Barbara after that to Ventura, like a half hour away along the coast. And I just sat there and I was blown away. Like this guidance that I've had was real. This was real. And but for whatever reason, because I needed validation and so forth, I had this voice. I knew that it was with me, but I didn't 100% trust it. And so I had to go to college. I went and got 4 degrees, graduated with honors, top 5% of the nation. Then I went and I started investing in real estate, started a landscape company, and made all this money. And again, it was for validation. And I had all these houses, and it was all because I just needed this external validation. And so what happened is then in 2003, Christmas 2003, I was in Big Bear Lake, California, and I had the dream mountain house. I just put in all new Viking appliances, and I had a Hummer, the big ones, the real Army ones, not the other ones. And I had everything that I thought I wanted. And it snowed even, because for me, growing up in Utah, I love snow at Christmas. So I got up early in the car one day, and I got up early and I went out to the Hummer, and I just put in satellite radio, and I went and I drove around the lake there in Big Bear, and I put in turned on Share on satellite radio, the Believe song, and which I loved at the time. And I'm listening to this amazing song, and I've got this amazing car or Hummer and everything I want. My family's coming for Christmas. And I realized in that moment, I wasn't happy. I had everything that the whole world says that we want to have. And I felt like I'd achieved it. And I think I was like 33, 34 at the time. And so anyway, what I didn't realize is that kind of put things in motion, because I really do believe in, at least for me, that I asked for all of this to happen. It's subconsciously. And so within a few months, I was traveling to Hawaii, and I decided to buy some property here. And I wasn't going to move here. I was happy with my superficial life in Los Angeles and Southern California. And as soon as the plane took off from Los Angeles to Honolulu, I had an abdominal hernia at the time that I didn't realize what it was or how serious they were. I was doing acting and modeling then also, and I did Gold's Gyms commercials, and I had like a perfect 6-pack and everything. But I'd given myself a hernia, and well, the hernia strangulated on the plane. The minute the plane took off, it strangulated, and it's an abdominal hernia. And so basically it kinks. And when it kinks, nothing flows through you. And so it started to die, and I didn't realize what was happening. I just was really sick. And most people die within 24 to 48 hours. Well, I went like 3 or 4 days. Like I went to Honolulu, stayed in Honolulu for a few days, just like awful. And then I flew over to the Big Island where the property was that I was going to buy. And I also was only into naturopathic medicine back then. And I went to a naturopathic doctor. My chest was turning black and blue. She should have known that I was dying. I should have known, but I didn't. And my intestines were all turning black and blue. And that's why my chest was black and blue. And so a day later, they convinced me, you've got to go to the ER. The minute I went to the ER, they knew he's dying. So within 20 minutes, they literally were wheeling me into the emergency room. And I was signing all these documents and, like, because I had no will or anything. And so I was signing everything over. And as I was heading into the operating room, the doctor's sitting there saying, I'm going to do everything I can to save you. I don't know what's going to happen. And all I knew is I can't die, but I was dying. And before I knew it, I went into this dark void. And I knew that I was dying. And I could see this bright light up to the right of me. And I was doing everything I could to stay away from the lights. And I literally said, this can't happen. This isn't, and I knew, I knew I was dying. And I said, no way. I'm like, I won't accept it. I won't accept my death. I will be a ghost. I will haunt this hospital in Hilo, Hawaii, in the jungle, and no one's ever going to find me. Literally, that was my thinking. And before I knew it, I went to the light. And this, I kind of call it like an NDE light because so it's a cross between a like distressing near-death experience because of the darkness and the void, and then also staying away from the light because it's kind of funny. Just intuitively, I knew to stay away from that light because once you go there, and before I knew it, that was all over. I woke up. My stomach is cut open. They had cut out 7 feet of necrotic, which means dead, intestines, full of bacteria. And they said, you can't go back to California for at least 6 months. You need to stay here. And because they needed to leave it open, it was all infected. And so I said, okay, well, if I have to stay here in Hawaii, I want to recover by a waterfall. Sure enough, the next day, Homes and Land magazine, 3 houses, 8 acres, private waterfall. It was for sale. It was for rent and for sale. So I got out of the hospital like 10 or 15 days later and went to see this place to rent and possibly purchase. Moved in, and within a month or 2, I bought it. And I never went back to California. So I never saw my houses again, sold them all over, online and everything, and stayed there in Hawaii. And what's really interesting is that's when I was, I didn't know it at the time, but I was having these basic effects of a near-death experience. And I was changed. But like I said, I call it like an NDE light because it was not like what happened to me later in 2018.
Hey everyone! I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, To learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality in the
So
title.
the love that I felt though then was absolutely amazing. And I came out, had this property, moved everything to Hawaii, and meaning all the real estate, I transferred it to Hawaii. And then I started having all of these spiritual experiences, starting with, in Hawaii, we call it a pueo, which is an owl. And I would see these pueo, which also in Hawaiian, they call them, I can't think of the name of the word. All of a sudden, I can't think of the name. But anyway, what I didn't realize is that this owl, it was haunting me because it was actually telling me what was going to happen. Like, get ready, you're going to lose everything. Then I heard this voice. I was in the shower and it said the same thing again. And by then I'd already had like all this real estate that I thought there's no way in a million years I could ever be broke because I had more money, more real estate than I ever thought I could have. And I was 35 now. So what happened is then the financial collapse happened of 2007, started losing everything financially. And I was going through more and more of these spiritual experiences that were preparing me for what I didn't want to believe, that I was actually going to lose everything financially. But as easy as I'd made all this money, I was losing it, and everything perfectly was coming together. At some point, after losing most everything, I moved to Oahu. Everything financially, everything. It was like ego death. Like literally everything that kept me, the way that I look at it now, is everything that kept me tethered to this illusion, this material illusion of the life that we have here was going away. And so comes 2017, well, my mom came to me in 2015 that I told you about, in the fall of 2015. And I kept asking her, why are you here? And she just kept saying, to be the mother that I couldn't be when you were alive, or when I was alive, when she was alive. And I just accepted that because I just kept thinking, she never told me what was going to happen. She just wanted to make sure that I knew she was with me. So in the fall of 2017, I started getting sick. And I'd always had lung issues and immune issues, which is why I was in the ICU when I was 6 months old. Always had not good lungs and immune system stuff. And I started getting sick 2017, October, and I wasn't getting better. And if you remember, I said that I did naturopath stuff. So I'd use all these Chinese herbs and stuff, and nothing was working. And by January of the following year, so 2018, my oxygen was around 50, 60%, 82% when you're in the hospital. Couldn't walk. I was completely done. I finally went to a doctor. I had no money, no insurance, nothing. I'd gone from like more money than anybody I knew and everything that I could have to nothing, to no money. I'd lost everything that meant everything to me. My money, my animals, the people that I loved the most, and I was dying. So there's a doctor place here, and they came and picked me up, and they took me, and I went to this doctor's office, And they could tell immediately, we can't help him. They called an ambulance. Then an ambulance took me to the hospital. And I was a mess. I mean, when I say a mess, I was a mess because I'd been dying and I didn't want to admit it. And I was still pretty vain. Like I didn't want to be hauled out of my condo on a stretcher through the lobby with an ER. Like it's amazing how I was then. And so anyway, I was taken to the emergency room. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. All they knew was I was dying. And so at some point they admitted me to the hospital, and I was waiting to go to the ICU. So I was in this one room, and as I was in this one room before I was going to the ICU, all of a sudden, the nurse that was taking care of me, and again, I was a mess. She's cleaning my bed, trying to clean me up and everything. And all of a sudden, this nurse and I, on one hand, she's this Filipino person here in this realm. And all of a sudden we go back and 400 or 500 years, and she's a nun, and she's, Spanish, and we're looking at this beautiful countryside, and I'm in this cathedral, and she says to me, I want to thank you for helping me fulfill my purpose as I help people cross to the other side. And so I grew up Mormon. I'm not Catholic, and I wasn't religious to begin with. And I later learned, about a year later, that this was St. Teresa of Avila. And I also later learned that this beautiful countryside that I'd seen in that moment, it was about 2 years later, I was actually preparing to do an interview, my first interview with somebody about what happened. And something guided me. It's like, okay, like research, like who is Teresa of Avila? And I went and I looked at this cathedral or basilica, they call it, where she lived and where she died. And the countryside that looks out at was the same countryside that I had seen in my NDE with her, the same exact countryside. And so she was the first person I saw.
Can I ask you one quick question? You
Yes.
just floated out and you were suddenly back in this other historic world 400 or 500 years ago. Were you physically there? Was it like watching a movie of it?
I was there. It was literally like where you are right now in your place. Mm-hmm. And you're sitting there in this place, and then go back 500 years ago. And what do you see outside the window? I mean, that's what it was. Like I'm in this hospital room in Honolulu, and looking out the window, which I don't even know what was out of the window. But all I know is all of a sudden I see this countryside. I didn't know it was Spain. I didn't know where it was. I didn't know who she was. All I know is all of a sudden I'm like back in time with this nurse who is a caregiver, nun, thanking me. That was the biggest thing that blew my mind. Is she's thanking me for helping her fulfill her purpose of helping people transition to the other side. That's what blew me away. Why are you thanking me? I should be thanking you, because I'm a mess and you're like cleaning me up and cleaning my bed up and helping me as I'm crossing over. But she thanked me. And that was the thing that just blew my mind.
So that was as if you were both in a past life together, where she was helping you back then as well.
Yes. And so I didn't know anything other than what I just shared with you when this happened. And it wasn't until about a year and a half later So after this NDE, like all of a sudden I had this renewed interest. Well, everything's spiritual, of course.
Wait, I have to push back though. You said there was a second part of this NDE after being back 400, 500 years ago. Am I correct or no? That was how did you come out of that? What happened next?
So yeah, this was the beginning of that I'm dying. This is, I wasn't even in the ICU yet. I didn't even know what was happening. It was with her. So after the experience with her, before I knew, I ended up in the ICU. I've never seen such fear reflected back at me from a doctor or doctors, because they all knew I was dying by then. They couldn't find out what was wrong. They couldn't stop it. And the head of the lung clinic, Straub Hospital here, he said, I don't know what to do. We have two choices. We can intubate or tracheotomy. But the fear in his eyes, seeing somebody dying, I will never forget. And in fact, I couldn't even see him later for a follow-up for several months. So basically, next thing I knew, after seeing the look in his eyes, is I was in the ICU. And the same sister who had been with me, with my mother, she flew from Salt Lake City. I wouldn't let him intubate me until she arrived. So she came, they intubated, which means put me on the ventilator, the breathing tube. And my lungs were totally coated with like the cement mucus. They couldn't see anything. My oxygen was like 50% or lower. And I was dying. And so my sisters came. So that sister came, and later another one did. They came to say goodbye. They went and they cleaned out my apartment and threw everything away. And I was just basically on the ventilator with all these monitors strapped down. I couldn't talk, of course. I couldn't really write because I was on all this propofol and all these different drugs. And they came, they threw everything away in my apartment, but my mom was with me. She was not the first person that I said that I saw was that nun, Saint Teresa of Avila, who I did not know then that's who it was. I didn't even know who she was. But she was the only person that I'd seen. My mom wasn't there. It wasn't until I was in the ICU when I started seeing my mom, and she was with me. And then I have a nephew who died of cystic fibrosis in 2008. And he was with me. And so I was in the ICU for over a month. And I signed all the papers that they're not going to keep me on life support, for a long period. And at some point, it became time for them to take me off life support and remove the ventilator. And like I said, I'd already signed everything. And as they started taking me off the ventilator, so I should back up for a second. I'd already crossed over many times. I was with my mom and God, surrounded by, and by now it's literally, there was no tunnel there. So remember in 2003, there was like this tunnel and this, I was in the dark and there's this tunnel. Now there's no tunnel. I am at the light at will. I can like literally turn my head and I'm in the light with God and my mom. And again, God, it wasn't a man or anything like that. It's a presence.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you meant by God. So
yeah. So I'm
You're
just
ahead
using,
of me.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, when I say God, source, universal love, absolute love, whatever you want to call it. And it's not a he, and it's not a man, it's a presence. And I was there with God. And again, that's just a word, which to me is just this absolute love and light, this love that I have never felt in my entire life. And I don't think most people feel it. Like I know I didn't. And so I'm separate from God and my mom, but I'm also one with them. So that was also wild because while there was a distinction, there was also this oneness and being one with them. So as I sat there with God and my mom, and I looked down at myself, and I looked at this almost like in a little fetal position, even though I wasn't in a fetal position because I was strapped down with tubes and everything. But that's how I saw myself, because for the first time I had compassion. I was looking at myself as if you're looking at, so if you've ever had a dog and the dog, had an injury, and then you have to put the collar on the dog because the dog licks at the wound and it doesn't even know it's hurting itself. And the way that feels, or like a baby the baby in the walker, and they're like running into things and they do stuff to hurt themselves and they don't know what they're doing. And that's how I saw myself for the first time. Oh my gosh, everything you believed about yourself and the world is wrong. And literally, it was, you poor thing, what have you been thinking? And that I will never, ever, ever forget, looking at myself and for the first time in my life, having compassion for myself. But again, it's as if, it's not me that I'm having it for me, but I'm having it for this earthly me, the small me. So I would go in and out. On one hand, I could be me in the body, and then I could leave at will, and then be above the body and be with God and be with my mom. And then my poor sisters, they couldn't take, they're watching their brother die and they couldn't take it. And so my one sister, she would leave and she would go to the cafeteria and she would eat egg salad. So I would leave my body, follow her to the cafeteria as she ate egg salad. The other sister would leave and she'd go to the coffee carts and she'd have coffee and call her fiance and call her kids and stuff. So I'd follow her. And so what's funny is a year, afterwards, as I'm going back to rehab and all that stuff, I would go to the coffee cart to feel that closeness to my sister, the one sister. And then I'd go to the cafeteria and get egg salad to feel closeness with the other one. So I was in and out of my body at will. And then they didn't know what was wrong with me. They were doing all of these tests. All they knew was I was dying. And that there was nothing they could do because they didn't know what was wrong. So they were going to drill for bone marrow to see if I had, I think, leukemia or something. And so apparently that's really painful. And I just literally, I'm like, I'm out of here. And I would go float over the water in Waikiki. And so I was just constantly in and out of my body for this whole period. Like I said, it was over a month that I was in the ICU. Well, at some point, when it was decided to take take me off the ventilator, And it's like, okay, we don't know. There's nothing really more we can do. And the longer you stay on the ventilator, the more I think likely you are to not get off the ventilator. So it was basically sink or swim. Can he breathe or not? The only other thing we can try is a tracheotomy, but they didn't know. So as they're bringing out, going to take the tube out, my nephew, who had died of cystic fibrosis in 2007, he appears at the end of the bed, and he's like above me. And so if you saw the cartoon Foghorn Leghorn, I think it's Warner Brothers cartoon with the big rooster, and he puffs up his chest. And that's what my nephew showed me. And he was showing me that because he's showing me how to breathe. And so he's puffing up his chest, showing me that rooster. And that's what he's doing. And of course, I'm laying there all strapped down. And that's what I was trying to emulate with him. And as the tube's coming out, he's showing me to puff up my chest. And then it's coming out. And then as the tube comes out, he breathed into me, showing me how to breathe. And all of a sudden, I could breathe. And it was the most euphoric sensation that I have ever felt in my entire life. I couldn't maintain the saturation, but I could breathe. So I had to have the oxygen tank or mask for at least another month, but I could breathe. And so I'm going to back up just a little bit, because before this happened, there was a song playing faintly in the ICU. And it's by an artist, his name's Daniel Goki. And it's called Tell Your Heart to Beat Again. And so that song was playing faintly in the background. And it basically says, yesterday is a closing door. You don't live there anymore. Tell your heart to beat again. And that song kept playing. And I was being told by my mother and God, this is like a rebirth for you. All of the stuff that's happened to you in the past, it doesn't matter. Let it go. You're really born again. And so, and again, it was faint that I heard that song. And then I'm going to jump ahead, because about a month later, I started hearing that song more and more again. And then I'm really jumping ahead now, but I finally got to go to a rehab hospital, which they didn't know, which I'll go back. But as I was going from the regular hospital to the rehab hospital, they put me in the medical transport in a wheelchair. As the ambulance is taking me to the rehab hospital, this song starts playing again on the radio. Yesterday's a closing door. You don't live there anymore. Tell your heart to beat again. And I texted my sisters. I said, it's that song again. Because by now they had to go back to their lives. And then later, after the rehab hospital, that song, I'd heard it a few times. And then I heard it as I was being taken home for the first time after 3 months. And then I got to spend the weekend at home. And the following Monday, I was supposed to go back to the hospital to outpatient physical therapy. As I went down to the lobby, the car, it's a medical transport kind of thing. And it was waiting with the door open. And there's that song again. Yesterday's a closing door. You don't live there anymore. Tell your heart to beat again. So now I'll go back, because back to the ICU after my nephew breathed into me, that song, and then the presence of, if I didn't have my mother with me, I wouldn't have made it. That's why she was here. And she didn't tell me any of that. Remember, I kept asking, why are you here? And it was just to be the mother she couldn't be when she was alive. But because of her and my nephew and several other beings, some of which I was aware of, and then some of which I wasn't. I mean, meaning some of I knew, but some I didn't. And that's what literally got me through the next several months, and then 2 years of rehab and occupational and physical therapy.
I have chills. I kind of lose myself in your story. It's very, I can see it's emotional, and thank you for sharing. Oh, so I'm gonna ask you first. I have a question about, you mentioned, tell me if I'm pronouncing this right, Saint Teresa of Avila. Okay.
Yeah.
How did you find out that's who she was? And is this a known saint? Would someone who knows religion know that name? Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how did you find out that's who she'd been?
Yeah. So after I out of the rehab hospital and I got home and I was doing physical therapy and occupational therapy, I at some point I realized, so I'm really stubborn. I need lots of proof. And that's why I've had, I think, all these experiences. So I thought I was going to, believe it or not, go back to my old life for a minute. And I had an experience where no, you're never going back to your old life. Nothing is ever going to be like it was before, ever. And I didn't care about money anymore. I've been really good at marketing. I'm a natural marketer, and I've had all this success with marketing and finance and all this real estate and all this stuff. And none of it, I couldn't even fathom going back, but I tried for a minute. And then it was clear. It's like, no, I was part of the illusion. And I was good at the illusion, marketing, and I've seen too much. I know too much. I'm never going to be the same. I don't understand any of it, but that was hard. And so what I learned is that, and I didn't know this then, but I was going through a spiritual emergency, and a spiritual emergency for many people, but especially me. So even though I had this spiritual upbringing, and I was still blasted open. I was so blasted open with, seeing my mother and I'll tell you other stuff about, hearing. I mean, I've had every clair that you can, and especially with my mother, the stuff she has done. And so I was blasted open, and I was living for 2 years, mostly on the other side. And I was having these experiences so I'm going to back up again. And in the hospital, so once I made it out of the ICU, my body had completely shut down to die, because I had end stages of a disease that there's no cure for. And so I wasn't expected it to really recover. And it's it was every day was a miracle. And he's most likely going to go to a convalescent home. And unless he can relearn some of this stuff, then he can go to a rehab hospital. So that is what I had to do. I had to fight to literally, of course, breathe again, but eat again, sit up again, walk again, go to the bathroom. I had to relearn everything. And that's just the physical stuff, because everything else psychologically, in many ways, it's been, almost 5 years now. I feel like I'm a 5-year-old, but because I'm having to relearn because everything I learned about myself and the world was wrong. But so I'm having to learn to walk again. So it was a huge ordeal for me. It took like 5 days for me to just like turn around in my bed and stand up, turn around sideways and put my feet on the ground and stand up. Well, to go from standing up to walking down the hallway was another huge ordeal. And as I'm walking down the hallway and they've got my IV and all my equipment, and I've got a nurse and 2 physical therapy people, and we're walking down the hallway, and I'm on a walker, and all of a sudden, I'm like 10 feet out of my room, and all of a sudden, I left my body, and I'm behind my body, looking down and watching this body with all this equipment and the physical therapist and the nurse. And it blew my mind because it's like, who's operating that body? Like, I'm not in it. I'm up here. And again, that's when this compassion came again. Yeah, so I had to relearn everything. But what I'm the support that I had from the other side, like in that instance, it's beyond, if it hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't believe it.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited to let you know it's finally here. Book 2 in the What the Fuck Just Happened series is ready for pre-order on Amazon, and it will be officially live August 15th and then available everywhere. And yes, I can now say that WTF Just Happened is actually a series. That's also super exciting and kind of surreal. This book is titled WTF Just Happened? A Sciencey Skeptic Investigates Even More Evidence of an Afterlife and Fights for Justice with Her Dead Dog. And it's available to pre-order on Amazon. I'll put a link out in the show notes, on Instagram highlights, and on my website, WTFJustHappened.net. To get more information on what the fuck just happened, go to WTFJustHappened.net. There you can order my book, WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey Skeptic Explores Grief, Healing, and Evidence of an Afterlife. You can learn all about how I came to conclude that there most likely is an afterlife, but you can also learn about the early stages of my grief and the amazing, fascinating people I met along the way. You can read about how much I harassed the mediums and scientists trying to get evidence to see if the mediums were cheating and see if what everyone was saying actually was true. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on any new developments and any interesting new What the Fuck updates. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if any of you have had a crazy what the fuck yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, reach out on either Instagram at WTF_just_happened_, or email me at hello@WTFjusthappened.net. I love hearing from all of you. It makes my day hearing your stories and questions and feedback and all of it. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?